want to talk about an issue that is seldom discussed, and that issue is compensating the minister of music. Now, I've been in the music ministry for full time for 40 years, so I've been on both sides of the compensation spectrum. So the one thing that I know that what I have written about and what we're going to be talking about in this series, it's not a problem for all churches. Not all churches have a problem being fair with paying ministers of music. But I do know that it is enough of a problem that it needs to be addressed. Now, I addressed the issue in my book, Harp Hunters, in chapter 5. In fact, chapter 5 is the longest chapter in the book. And in that chapter, I talk about, the issues surrounding adequate compensation for ministers of music. I talk about those who are the financial decision makers in the church as to how that role plays with deciding how ministers of music is going to be paid or the amount that they are going to be paid. I also speak to those churches who genuinely cannot afford to pay a minister of music, the way they might like to. And I offer some suggestions for their consideration if you find yourself in a situation like that. I also address those musicians who tend to treat the church as though it's a gig, kind of a placeholder until they can rise to the level of gospel music stardom. I also address this issue that I've been hearing for many years about there being a shortage of musicians, a shortage of church musicians. And there are several other issues and topics that I cover in chapter 5. I hope you will just stay with me for the entire series. And even better, it would be great if you would just go out and buy my book, Harp Hunters. Somebody ought to say amen. Amen. Now, but what I want to talk about right now, I want to kind of back into it. I'm a sports fanatic, and football is one of my favorite sports, so I'm going to be using a football analogy to move into the points that I want to make here in this particular setting. Ja'Marr Chase is a wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. He spent his college years at LSU, where, of course, he was on the football team, a wide receiver. He was on the LSU team when they won the national championship in 2020. While Ja'Marr was at LSU, he was a phenomenal athlete. He was a phenomenal wide receiver. Let me just share with you some of his stats. He was the first in the history of LSU in receiving yards in one season. He was first in the history of LSU in receiving touchdowns in one season. He was the first in NCAA history in touchdown receptions of 50 yards or more in one season. He was second in the history of LSU in receiving yards per game. Now, I throw these stats out about Ja'Marr because these are the things that the Cincinnati Bengals looked at before they drafted Ja'Marr. They looked at his accomplishments. They looked at his qualifications before deciding to make him a part of the team because they felt that he had something to offer them. Now, when they brought Ja'Marr onto the team, when they made that decision, nobody in the front office asked, hey, what's the going rate for wide receivers these days? You know why? Because there is no going rate. Every player in the National Football League is paid based on their qualifications, their accomplishments, and what they will bring to the team that will enhance their chances of getting to the championship and perhaps a Super Bowl. Now, in my years of travel, I've been asked many, many times, hey, what's the going rate for a minister of music these days? Short answer is, there is none. And if you're asking that question, chances are you have already decided what you are or are not going to pay a minister of music, no matter what his or her qualifications are. It's always been interesting to me that the first question is not, can you help me find somebody with the necessary skill set that will, help me to bring the level of our music ministry up, to bring it to a new level. No, the first question is, how much is it going to cost me? And the question in and of itself minimizes the value of a minister of music candidate before he or she is even interviewed. The church continues to advance this narrative that if you want your church to grow, one of the major ingredients you need is good music, whatever good music is deemed to be. Yet when a qualified candidate comes up, the church will try and pay as little as they can get away with, even though this person is qualified. And this person can do what it is they need to be, they need done, good music. But when it comes to brick and mortar, building a sanctuary, building a family life center, the church will go all out to complete that project. The church is going to do whatever it needs to complete that project. It will ask the parishioners to give sacrificially over and above tithes and offerings. They'll have fundraisers. They'll make loans. They'll walk the land, praying that God would bless them with the land. But when it comes to compensating the church's staff, those people who are going to be carrying out the ministry in the new building, the church all of a sudden becomes powerless. We can't afford it. And, it has always baffled me, as to how the church can, elevate the music, talk about how important music is to developing the church, while at the same time devaluing the musician. I've often wondered why that is the case, and I think I've come up with the answer. There are two things, I believe, that goes into the church's thinking when it comes to evaluating music and musicians. And I'm going to talk to you about those two things in part 2 of our discussion. I hope you will join me. Hard copies of Harp Hunters can be purchased on my website, www.ewilsonjr.com. You can download the ebook on Amazon.com.